with reference to a god or a goddess, with reference to the nature of things, or yes, just the functional requirements. But part of the sociology of knowledge then is also to have a certain critical role in sort of questioning the legitimacy of these second order narratives, myths, and justifications. So the word of legitimization or legitimation in societies is not just to explain sort of the adequateness or normative adequacy of the existing social order and to explain the stability over time. It is also simultaneously fulfilling a more descriptive function. It is, in a way, an instruction manual of explaining to new members of society how institutions work. And this double role, so both descriptive, both normative, also makes it a little bit difficult to see the role of legitimization in society as what it is. On the individual level, legitimization also works in favor of creating a coherent narrative for oneself, right? So the individual in a functionally differentiated societies fulfills many different roles and may face the problem of integrating these different roles in a coherent narrative. So this is what we often, what we call also biography, where we tell ourselves sort of a coherent narrative in order to make sense of our existence across time. Yeah? So we want also stability of that narrative over time. We want to give sense to the trajectory we are on and the different roles we are taking on. So legitimization is not only something that society does when we say we live in a meritocratic society in order to justify, for instance, certain inequalities, but it is also something that acts on the individual level, where we need certain narratives, myths, self-narratives, autobiographies in order to make sense of ourselves. Yeah? So it's important also in a way to explain to ourselves the transitions into different stages of life, right? Becoming a student, entering the job market, or becoming a retired person. All of these moments are often face crisis of identity, right? The midlife crisis, etc. And in these moments, these second order kind of institutions and the repertoires that our societies provide us with in constructing these second order narratives become very important. Last but not least, the process of socialization is basically the one where the norms, institutional norms, become internalized. New members of societies or just also in new roles have to become socialized into them. In sociology, we distinguish often between the primary, secondary, even tertiary kind of socialization, corresponding then to sort of socialization in childhood, where parents are sort of the significant other in Mead's terminology that socialize us into the world. Secondary, then education institutions and also the labor market as important role to get into the sort of secondary socialization phase where we internalize norms also much more through the generalized others. So generalized others are basically the implicit others holding sort of cross societal norms that we try to live up with. And tertiary socialization is often the one that we undergo when in adult life, where we work in different establishments that may have a socialization effect, or something that I studied in my own work. We move into a single family house, perhaps. We become homeowners. Does this socialize us into a conservative lifestyle, perhaps, as much of existing research has it? So there are these tertiary also socialization mechanisms. Okay, I mentioned in the very beginning that the sociological approach in phenomenology also comes with, I think, an interesting insight into what knowledge means. And I think it also enriches a little bit the philosophical epistemologies, that is the discipline of what knowledge is and how it is defined through a social dimension, if you want. And this may be juxtaposed here in a table where on the left-hand side you have the more traditional René Descartes, so Cartesian epistemology, which focuses much more on the individual and how an individual cognizing subject can get certain knowledge, so like being certain of certain knowledge in the world, sort of in an interaction between the individual and the world on the one hand, and here on the right-hand side in the table, you rather see the very different and I find enriching starting point that a more social epistemology that phenomenologists would defend, which criticizes a little bit the Cartesian brainwashing that thinks that in order to be certain about the state of the world and our knowledge about it, we need to really start from that absolute notion of knowledge that an individual can gain through introspection and through interaction only with sort of an object world, a criticism that you probably already found in Parsons, in the Parsons reading, and that is a little bit reiterated here. So let us briefly go through the different juxtapositions here of a Cartesian individualist epistemology and the more phenomenologically inspired social epistemology. So starting point is different already, right? In Cartesian epistemology, the idea is I cannot be sure about this being the case in the world and me having true knowledge about it. So I should go into an introspection kind of perspective of my own mental states in order to make sure that the external world is really there by being sure that my cognizing ego is sort of on a safe ground. So starting with a skepticist approach to the external world, this is very different than in social epistemology, where individuals are always in interaction with a very concrete life world, and just start from an everyday kind of realism, right? So, I mean, this hand is here, right? So this bottle here is in front of me. Though there's no doubt about this. This is an evident belief, which I can confirm while just interacting on these with these objects on an everyday basis. And I mean, others tell me about things all of the time. I can easily trust this knowledge by belief, by testimony, as reported by others. I even have to rely on it in order to function in an everyday context. So very different kind of starting points. The way then that sort of certainty is produced in the Cartesian world is by abstracting from the social world, by like a lonely withdrawal from the social environment. This is very different again in the phenomenological world, where the starting point of individual is like being embedded, if you want, in social context, as when Heidegger says that we are always being amidst, or also there's a social epistemology in the sense that there's a division of cognitive labor. Yeah, so you're an expert there, you have been there, I haven't been there, like locational advantages and knowledge generation. And I just trust you in this knowledge being adequate. So this more social epistemological position is also expressed in a Heidegger quote here from one of his lectures, which I briefly cite. Quote, because the subject is conceived of, as it were, as having its being amidst, or sein bei, cut out as a kind of torso subject, the question concerning being with one another, miteinander sein, and its nature goes astray in Cartesian epistemology, that is. Since both subjects are underdetermined, more has to be done for mediation to take place between the two than what is necessary according to their nature. The